Good morning. Nurses at 117 NHS trusts in England, along with others in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, could be out on strike before Christmas. A&E and ambulance care will remain as normal, but non-urgent clinics will be forced to slow down, which will mean patients facing cancellations and delays. And it's not just nurses. Junior doctors, midwives, ambulance drivers, physiotherapists, hospital porters and cleaners are all balloting for industrial action. They're demanding a pay increase that keeps up with inflation. But a joint report out this morning from the New Economic Foundation and Trade Union Congress says the NHS needs an extra £15 billion a year just to maintain current services.
This action is about speaking up for patients. It's about ensuring that those patients don't languish on waiting lists any longer. And they won't if we are able to fill the vacant posts, if we're able to hold on to the nurses by giving them a decent wage and ensuring that this health service is fit for purpose.
Well, joining us now is Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris, representing the government this morning. Hello, thanks for joining us on the programme. Lots to talk about with Northern Ireland. I know you made a statement yesterday lunchtime after PMQs, but first let's talk about nurses, should we? Going to give them any more money?
Well, they are getting some more money. I mean, the nurses' pay has been set by independent bodies for quite some time, and that award has been made and will be paid. And but I want to say, like everybody would like to, that nurses, doctors, everybody in the NHS went that extra mile during the time of the pandemic. Actually, they were the only group of people who got a pay rise in the public sector in the pandemic, a 3% pay rise. But the ask of the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, at 17% is a high ask. And I believe even Labour say they can't afford that.
Do nurses get paid enough as it is?
That's very difficult to judge. I mean, I was looking at the pay bands. It's not my area of expertise, as you'd understand.
I know, but you...
No, exactly right. I know it's a vocation. I suppose you could say politics is a vocation in many ways. And a nurse will start on £27,000 rising to, I think it's band 5, band 6 in the kind of low to mid £30,000. Is that enough? I mean, who put a value on something, on care like that?
Given that you mention politicians, do nurses deserve as much pay as politicians?
Well, some people wouldn't want to pay politicians anything, so I think nurses deserve...
Not my question.
I know, but I'm a politician, so I'm giving you... I think that's an unfair question because we're in completely different places.
But nurses are using food banks, they're saying, and having to eat leftover food that patients have not eaten. Yeah,
I've heard those stories too, and they're troubling and actually very, very, very sad. But everything the government is doing across the whole of public sector pay, which is the only pay sector that we can influence, is aiming at the lower paid and the more vulnerable in society as well when we offer more packages of support. So we understand that we need to help people a bit more.
Minister, the Education Secretary who was on yesterday said there's no point in nurses going on strike because there's no more money. Do you agree with that?
I think, well, I used to be rail minister. I used to engage with the rail unions a huge amount. And actually, I do think there's those discussions are actually generally valuable because politicians will, unless we come from the background that of the department that in rail, I wasn't a railwayman, so I needed to understand better the asks, the conditions, the industry itself. So the engagement is definitely worth doing. But yeah, public sector finances are not in the best of shapes, and we're trying to stabilise our economy, make sure we drive it forward. So there are better times ahead. But 17% ask is a very big ask in public sector terms.
So just to clarify, is it a pointless strike because there's no more money for nurses?
I'd never say a strike is pointless, but this completely disrupts a huge host of public services that are very, very important to the whole nation, and dialogue is always the best way.
What about nurses in Northern Ireland? Who did they negotiate with? Yeah,
that's a really good question, because up until the 28th of October, that had been a negotiation with the Minister for Health there. Currently, there is no minister, and so I'm afraid some of those responsibilities now fall to me.
You keep kicking the can down the road. What's the latest situation?
it's a can that everybody else wants to kick down the road. Everybody says to me that elections in Northern Ireland at this point in time will just polarise society a great deal more and actually come up with no different results. And so the latest situation is yesterday in the House of Commons, I announced I was going to try and get some primary legislation through the House to delay the elections to the new year, to give time and space to two very important things: for the Northern Ireland parties to come together for more discussions about going back into the Assembly so local people can make local choices on their constituents' behalf, but also so the UK government and the European Commission can have some time and space to talk and negotiate about the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is one of the key reasons why the unionist community in Northern Ireland and their representatives won't go into the executive.
Usefully, our Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, I was chatting to him last night, and he pointed out that on the 3rd of October you said you would push the button and call a Stormont election if devolution had not been restored by the 28th of October. Then on the 18th of October you told the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee you would call an election if devolution had not been restored by the 28th of October. Then on the 28th of October you said you were disappointed that devolution had not been restored and would be calling an election. Yesterday you said you wouldn't be calling an election.
Forgive me for being a politician that listens to people, but I did so on the first, at 1 minute past midnight on the 28th of October, the responsibility, all ministers disappeared in Northern Ireland. So, and there's a very, very big budget black hole in Northern Ireland's finances, and all those responsibilities fell to me. I've been talking to all the political parties. I've been talking to businesses, to community groups, to ordinary folk on the streets, and no one wanted an election. And I've now done something that creates the time and space for conversations to take place so the executive hopefully can reform, and for conversations to take place between, as I say, the UK government and the European Commission to try and solve one of the biggest obstacles to that.
What's the big problem?
In which way? There's always problems. The big problem is the protocol for the unionist community, because it means a whole host of goods are not available in Northern Ireland that should be and are available in the rest of Great Britain. And that needs to be solved.
How do you do that?
By negotiations, with showing trust and respect with the European Commission.
As far as the European Commission is concerned, and indeed the European courts, EU law, your boss, Rishi Sunak, has said that, well, he's certainly talking tough when he was chatting to me in the summer, saying that EU law, most of it would be scrapped. It would have nothing to do with us by the end of his tenure, by the next election. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, I mean, so it's all EU laws would have been transposed onto our statute books. And the bits that are remaining, the references to European law, there's a bill going through the House of Commons at this very point in time to remove those.
So how do you see the 2023, how do you see this being fixed? You talk about the Northern Ireland Protocol. We know that the Northern Ireland Protocol is an incredibly vexatious subject that no one seems to be able to fix.
Yeah, I mean, it has been like that. And firstly, I should say that when it was written, I honestly don't think the people behind writing it thought it would have the ramifications that it had.
I thought it was oven ready this day.
No, the protocol... So politicians are legislators. Legislators are very good at creating law, but when the rubber hits the road, sometimes you get unforeseen consequences. So
Boris Johnson was wrong to say that it was an oven-ready deal.
No, it was an oven-ready deal. And the European Commission, who who co-authored the protocol with the UK government, everybody believed that this would work. It has not.
Oven-ready, Minister. How can Northern Ireland be completely rudderless?
But Northern Ireland's not rudderless. In fact, that's really quite untrue. What Northern Ireland needs is local devolved government to work, which is set up 25 years ago by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The institutions do need to work, and when they are working, they really do help with peace and prosperity across Northern Ireland. My job is to try and get them back to work. The big obstacle is the Northern Ireland Protocol. Everybody, the European Commission, the UK government, Irish government, people in Northern Ireland, everybody realises that it's a problem that needs to be solved. It needs to be solved by an honest understanding and respect and trust on both sides. We have that. And now not having the elections in this calendar year has cleared some space for
When will
talks.
the elections be?
So I haven't moved them that far into the future. I've given myself 2 periods of 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So
3 months.
And so look, that essentially means the first 3 months of next year.
So there will be an election.
There will be an election, yeah.
In the first 3 months of next year. You sure?
Yeah.
Positive?
Yeah.
OK. Talk to me about Gavin Williamson.
Gavin Williamson's resigned.
I know he has. What did you think about what he had to say?
Well, he did something. He allegedly did something that is which is a very serious allegation, very serious allegations against him. So he was right to resign.
Should he have been given a job in the first place? I mean, I was looking at some reports overnight suggesting that the Prime Minister knew about these allegations and still gave him a job.
Yeah, well, I haven't heard or seen any evidence of that. And
what if it's true?
As you will recall, I was the government chief whip for 6 months.
Would you have used that language?
I would never have used language like that. That's not my style, but maybe that's why I'm not chief whip anymore. Because
so does a chief whip need to use that sort of language?
No, I think a chief whip does need to be firm and. But you know, Gavin Williamson, the allegations against him are very serious, and he has resigned, and that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, but should he have been given the job in the first place?
He was given a job. I don't know what people knew at what times, and so I'm not going to comment on speculation like that.
But what if the Prime Minister did know? Was it appropriate?
It's a lot of what ifs, isn't it?
No, not really.
Yeah,
because the suggestion is that he did know.
Yeah, no, but
the Prime Minister's almost hinted at the fact that he knew something was going on. Well, but he needed his support in order to get into number 10.
I think that's all speculation. And the wonderful thing about the United Kingdom is that you are innocent until you're proven guilty. He's resigned from his post. There's investigations going on, and that's the right and proper thing to happen.
What do you think of him as a man? You obviously know him.
I actually don't know him quite well, although he did give me my first job. He was chief whip, and I was a whip, a very junior whip in his office. You know, he was a half-decent boss. Even
though he allegedly tells people to slit their throats and jump out of windows.
Yeah, I've never seen that behaviour in him, which is why I say you're innocent until you're proven guilty, and let the investigation take its place. OK,
and as far as Matt Hancock is concerned?
Yeah, well, he should be here with us, voting and debating in Parliament.
Did you watch him on the telly?
No, I'm afraid I don't watch it. Don't tell anybody.
Do you not watch it?
No.
Well, it's very good, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. But he did look a bit of a Burke yesterday, it has to be said. And It does look as though he's going to get a very hard time.
So I know the format of the show, and I do believe there's quite a lot of people in a building not too far away from here, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who've downloaded a certain app so they can vote. I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a great story. Is that true?
Yeah, of course it is.
Wow, that's amazing. So you think that he should be here? You think it's totally inappropriate that an MP should be the other side of the world when such important...
I mean, I've read this morning what he said about how he wants to prove that all MPs are human, and that's actually, that is true. All MPs are human, but I think we do that every day in our constituencies and what we do in Parliament.
OK, you've got a cold like me, haven't you?
Yeah,
I wish you better.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us, much appreciated. Thank you. It's great to see you. Looking at the papers for you this morning, and several of them, including the Telegraph, lead with the nurses' strike, which will be the first national walkout. Away from that, the Metro focuses on food banks and the report that warns they're at a breaking point this morning. Democrats avoid crushing defeat, says the FT, but points out they're still at risk of losing control of Congress. The Express reports on the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, pushing police to take a firmer approach to deal with eco-protesters. And the Sun goes with Jennifer Aniston talking about her painful efforts years ago to become a mum, which failed. Now, food banks say, they are dealing with a tsunami of need that has put them at breaking point. They've given out 1.3 million emergency parcels in the last 6 months alone. Aisha is standing by for us this morning. Hi, Aisha. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. They're really under pressure, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. The Trussell Trust has said that food banks are at breaking point because of this tsunami of need. There's a record number of people needing food banks at the moment. In that six-month period, like you said, 1.3 million emergency parcels were delivered to people. That was around 320,000 people that they were helping. And of those 1.3 million meals, around half of those, 500,000, went to children. It means that the strain is really being felt at places like here. City Harvest are a food distribution charity. They help provide around 1.1 emergency meals to around 350 organisations and food banks supporting people who require the help. And they say they're feeling the strain. They first started feeling pressure when the pandemic began. After that, it did settle, it plateaued. But now they say that demand has skyrocketed. And given the current economic crisis as well, they say that it's becoming increasingly difficult to get the donations in from retailers because of the economic situation. And that's something that the Trussell Trust also highlighted. They said that at the moment, needs are exceeding donations. So they've called on the government to provide adequate support in their upcoming budget.
Lovely. Thank you for now. Thanks. Joe Biden said last night that Americans had sent a clear and unmistakable message that they wanted to preserve democracy. His Democrats didn't win, but it is becoming clear that Donald Trump lost. The former president had been hoping for a red wave that would give him the momentum to launch a new bid for the White House. Instead, the tide went out on the candidates he supported. Joe standing by in Phoenix again for us this morning. Hi, Joe. You were reflecting on what might be now that the results are in proper. What can you tell us?
Well, I think it's becoming slightly more clear what could happen in the next couple of years, Kay. Clearly, it's very important who is up and who is down in the midterms, who is in and out of the House of Representatives and of the Senate. But the bigger international significance is how all of this affects the next race for the White House in 2024. And indeed, if the two big beasts who fought the last contest fight the next one.
He is the most unpopular US president of modern times. But Joe Biden's Democrats have achieved a historically good set of results.
It was a good day, I think, for democracy. And I think it was a good day for America. We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first midterm election in the last 40 years. And we had the best midterm for governors since 1986.
He is savouring some rare good news.
Hey, buddy, Joe Biden, congratulations, man. Congratulations.
Especially with doubts over whether a man who turns 80 in 10 days' time will run for re-election.
Hey, Gov, congratulations. My intention is that I run again, but I'm a great respecter of fate, and this is ultimately a family decision. My guess is it'll be early next year we make that judgment.
Another possible candidate for the 2024 race is holed up at his Mar-a-Lago resort. After many of Donald Trump's candidates failed to make waves, there are reports he is angry and wounded, especially after the success of his Republican rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Counting continues in Nevada and Arizona for two Senate seats which could decide who has control of the upper house. In Phoenix, Arizona, far from Washington, views on the next occupant of the White House are mixed.
I don't know. I really hope Trump doesn't run. I'd like to see him get indicted, but as for Biden, I don't know, kind of indecisive.
I'm not saying I'm a Trump supporter. Like, you're not going to see me with a MAGA hat on. But I think he's better than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's much older.
Who should we be watching?
Ron DeSantis, without a doubt. Ron DeSantis set himself up last night.
Whilst it could be a few more days before we have the final results here, nationwide there are clear and consequential trends. And the balance of power, particularly in the Republican Party, seems to be shifting. As the electability of one contender and the candidacy of another are being questioned, it is very possible the old guard will soon be replaced with new faces. And in recent hours, evidence that key parts of the Republican establishment may be turning against Donald Trump. Just look at this front page of Rupert Murdoch's New York Post. The headline, Trumpty Dumpty. Don, who couldn't build a wall, had a great fall.
Can all the GOP's men put the party back together again? The paper saying that Donald Trump sabotaged the Republicans in the midterms. Meanwhile, there are widespread reports, Kay, that some of Donald Trump's advisers are encouraging him to delay the announcement expected next Tuesday that he will launch a campaign for the White House again. He has commented on this, saying, "We had tremendous success at the midterms," I think he meant. Why would anything change? But it's certainly possible in the coming hours and coming days he does change.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Coming up on the programme, we'll ask NHS providers about how safety and care can be provided during the nurses' strike. The former England goalkeeper, Arsenal goalkeeper as well, David Seaman, on the Three Lions World Cup chances, as we wait to hear who's in the 26-man squad that'll be heading to Qatar. But before all of that, some of today's other headlines. And the Ministry of Defence says it will shortly complete the delivery of a further 1,000 surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine. The Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, said it followed a request for more air defences to protect the country's critical infrastructure from Russian drones. A man accused of attacking the husband of the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been charged with assault and attempted kidnapping by a grand jury in San Francisco. Paul Pelosi was attacked with a hammer during a break-in at the couple's home last week. The second and final phase of the Grenfell public inquiry ends today. It was set up to look into what happened at Grenfell Tower and the fire in which 72 people died. The council that owned the 24-storey building has apologised unreservedly for the way it failed its residents. Russia says it's withdrawing troops from Kherson in the south of Ukraine to protect the life and health of its service personnel. They had occupied the city since March, declaring it forever Russia. Kherson lies on the river Dnipro. It's a significant target in its own right and a gateway to Crimea. Ukrainian soldiers in the region are engaged in hard fighting. Our correspondent Alex Rossi has been with an artillery team near the village of Davidiv Brid.
They need to work quickly. Their position just a few kilometres from enemy lines is exposed and in the line of fire. The drone pilot, who's known by his call sign Playboy, is scouting out where best to attack.
Here is the Russians. Here he going to the trench. You see?
Yep.
Oh,
you can see him moving
here.
around.
Yeah. Oh, you can see the Russians over here.
That's incoming.
But they are taking huge risks. Whilst they can see the enemy, the Russians also have drones.
Get down.
And they can be easily spotted. This is dangerous work, but without this eye in the sky, Ukraine's artillery crews would be firing blind. Further back from the front line, troops from the unit, a volunteer platoon called Carlson, which includes foreign soldiers, load up with ammunition.
It's going good. We're pushing them back and they're falling back. Unfortunately, they're destroying everything as they go.
With winter on its way, the fight for Kherson has become more desperate. Ukraine eager to take advantage of its momentum and Russia's retreat.
The war here on the southern front is being fought across wide open fields. It is an artillery battle and it is absolutely deadly. Now, this team has just been given the coordinates by the drone reconnaissance unit and they're heading now to fire rockets at Russian positions.
The launch position has been primed and it doesn't take long to line up the targets. There is no time to hang around. The firing needs to be done at speed. Images captured by drone show the impact. It's these kind of barrages that are forcing the Russians to withdraw. But even before the smoke clears, the Ukrainian artillery team are making their escape. They're vulnerable now to a rapid counter-strike. This fight is a clash of nerve and firepower. And for the moment, on this perilous frontier, Ukraine is winning. Alex Rossi, Sky News in Kherson region.
Talking more about that in just a few moments. And also speaking to an MP from Ukraine, that to come. Ray Fine's on the show as well. What's the weather doing?
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Turning milder by Friday, wind and rain largely confined to the north and the west. Before then, there'll be a mainly dry start today, but it'll be cloudy and windy with gales in the northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, it's not every day that you receive a gift from a princess, but at 3 years old, Akeem from North London has managed to do just that. Chatting with the Princess of Wales, young Akeem managed to eye up her Royal British Legion poppy, and Kate was happy to oblige.
My name is Catherine.
Okay.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Have you got a poppy?
We're having flowers.
Yeah, it's very, very nice. Would you like mine?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You can have my poppy. There you go. See if I can get it out.
Yeah.
Shall I see if I can get out? Here we go. And do you know what this is for? It's remembering all the soldiers who died in the war. There you go. That's for you. You look after it. Yeah. Maybe I'll...
Lovely. Time now for a look at some of the other photos that have caught our eye today. The York Guard welcomed the arrival of King Charles and the Queen Consort at Micklegate Bar in York in a traditional ceremony. The bells of York Minster rang out for the royal visit. There you go. He got eggs thrown at him, didn't he, yesterday, but managed to dodge them quite niftily. Christmas coming, and the small village of Ardingly in Sussex definitely can't escape it. They're home to the UK's tallest living Christmas tree, which can be seen at Wakehurst Gardens. This year, it's been decorated with 1,800 energy-saving bulbs. We got those pictures? There it is. And worth remembering that there's a place, actually, I think in Berkshire, called Christmas. Meantime, it was the job of this man, Russell Croft, to make all the final checks on the 37-metre giant redwood. And of course, we had to throw in some cute animal pics for you. These are the first new seal pups of the season to be born on the Farne Islands off the coast of Northumberland. Even waving at us. Good morning. Good morning. More on the nurses' strike coming up. We'll speak to the organisation that represents NHS trusts, and we'll also hear from the Royal College of Anaesthetists. All of that to come in just a few moments' time. Do stay tuned. Everybody, a very good morning to you watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Thursday morning, Cabinet Minister Chris Heaton-Harris has told me he's very sad to see reports of nurses resorting to eating patients' leftovers and using food banks as they prepare to take unprecedented strike action. President Biden has hinted at running for a second White House term after Republicans failed to make predicted gains in the midterms. And family and friends have held a service for a Britishman who has been killed fighting alongside Ukrainian forces against Russia. In the last half an hour, I've been speaking to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris. We began with the nurses' strike. He disagreed with a Cabinet colleague who told me yesterday that the industrial action's pointless, but he did say it will cause significant disruption. And Mr Heaton-Harris conceded that reports of nurses having to eat patients' leftovers are upsetting.
I've heard those stories too, and they're troubling and actually very, very, very sad. But everything the government is doing across the whole of public sector pay, which is the only pay sector that we can influence, is aiming at the lower paid and the more vulnerable in society as well, when we offer more packages of support. So we understand that we need to help people a bit more.
Minister, the Education Secretary who was on yesterday said there's no point in nurses going on strike because there's no more money. Do you agree with that?
I'd never say a strike is pointless, but this completely disrupts a huge host of public services that are very, very important to the whole nation, and dialogue is always the best way.
Tamara is here with us. Tamara, what do you make of what you had to say this morning? Morning.
Well, morning. How are ministers going to resolve the first ever nurses' strike, which is going to have huge implications for patients? Although people will still be able to get emergency care, they are keen to stress, of course, to have what's essentially a bank holiday service over the very stretched winter period, especially with people already waiting a long time for cancer treatment, is going to be devastating for a lot of patients. But nurses say they're doing this for patients because the profession has seen people leave in droves. There are lots of unfilled posts, tens of thousands of unfilled nursing posts, because people can't live on the wages they say that they are getting, which is why they are pushing for an inflation plus 5-point rise, so a 17% rise, given inflation's where it is at the moment. Steve Barclay, the new health secretary, says that's too high. That's going to cost £9 billion, which is 6% of the whole NHS budget. Is there a compromise that they can make? Well, of course, it involves getting round the table and ministers wanting to make a compromise. And what will be in the back of their minds is, if you offer nurses more than they've already been given this year, then, of course, strike ballots coming from potentially junior doctors, ambulance workers in England and Scotland, hospital cleaners and other NHS staff, where does that leave those negotiations?
Yeah, interesting about Matt Hancock as well, saying he should be here with us.
Yes, it seems to be the line from ministers. They're often asked why Boris Johnson was able to go to the Caribbean, or Liz Truss able to go on a sort of post-prime ministerial holiday and not represent their constituents. But he says that Matt Hancock should be here with his constituents. He was tackled about that on the show last night, actually. But he says that he is being with the people and getting big audiences for his antics in the jungle.
Yeah, certainly that. And who's actually voting for him to do all of these tasks?
I know the format of the show, and I do believe there's quite a lot of people in a building not too far away from here, the House of Commons and the House of Lords, who've downloaded a certain app so they can vote. I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's a great story. Is that true?
Yeah, of course it is.
Oh.
I'm urgently investigating.
Would you vote for him to do tasks?
I don't think that would be ethical in my job, but I know quite a few people in Parliament who say that they have.
OK, it's good to talk to you. Thanks a lot. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Meantime, let's take you to chat to Saffron Caudry, the interim chief executive of NHS providers, which represent NHS services that treat patients. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. How concerned are you about what's likely to happen?
Well, obviously, the fact that we are now going to see industrial action by nurses is concerning. But what we have to remember is that trust leaders up and down the country will be preparing for this. Their key responsibility is to make sure that those who need emergency and life and treatment for life-threatening conditions will continue to receive that. And indeed, next week there is an exercise being undertaken across the NHS in England to make sure that services will be in place, particularly given that this industrial action is likely to take place over the winter period. But preparations are being made.
Are you in support of nurses' action?
I think what we have to remember is that the conditions that have led nurses to this action, we completely understand how strongly they feel. Below inflation pay awards, rising cost of living. We heard that earlier in your piece. We've heard these tales of nurses resorting to food banks. Many trusts are setting up school uniform banks, for example, to support nurses and others in the basic costs of living. And also we have to remember that the NHS has been struggling for a long time in terms of staff shortages and workloads that have really been rocketing. So we understand the circumstances. I think what we want to see is the government to come round the table with the unions to actually reach a resolution on this dispute, because that's the most important element of this. We understand the conditions that have led nurses to strike, but what we have to see now is the government come round the table.
So does that mean that you are supporting them?
I think what I'm talking about is it's not my role to say whether I do or don't support nurses. I'm here representing trust leaders whose job it is to actually make sure that we have safe services and emergency services in place. Every nurse has the right to withdraw labour, as every individual does in this country, if they have voted to do that, and if the law says that they can, then they can. But what I'm here to do is to talk about how trust leaders up and down the country will actually focus on making sure that there are services there for patients and their carers to use.
How appalled are you to hear that nurses are using food banks and eating food left over from patients?
Oh, deeply and really concerned about this. And we did a survey, NHS providers did a survey earlier this year that looked at the impact of the rising cost of living on the NHS, both in terms of what it does to NHS budgets, in terms of inflation, but also what it means for staff. And we know that those particularly on lower pay grades are really struggling. One of the things we're particularly concerned about is actually retaining staff in the NHS, experienced staff, and making sure that they don't leave NHS positions to go and work in, for example, retail or hospitality, which in the run up to Christmas is a possibility for many of those more junior staff. We don't want to see that happen. We know that the NHS staff are incredibly well trained and committed, and we want to see them staying in their role. The NHS needs them and patients need them.
And what are we saying to concerned patients who, there's already 7 million people that are waiting for a procedure on the NHS? That's just going to get worse, isn't it?
Well, obviously, no one wants to see this disruption because the NHS has been working incredibly hard to clear that backlog. I think what patients need to know is that the NHS is undergoing this exercise next week to make sure that safety will be preserved, and it may mean that some procedures are delayed or moved to another date. And we know that that is deeply upsetting for people who have planned for a procedure. And we know that people have been waiting longer than they should. I think what we have to remember is that the NHS and trusts up and down the country have been doing what they can to get activity levels up to make sure that they get through as many of those operations as possible. So yes, no one wants to see potential delays to that, but we may well see them. But I think what everyone knows and doesn't underestimate is the potential distress and disruption that will cause individuals.
Absolutely. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's also bring in the Vice President of the Royal College of Anaesthetists, that's Helge Johansson. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
What are the current challenges that you and your members are facing every day?
Absolutely. I think listening to what Saffron said about staff shortages, we definitely see that day to day. We've identified for anaesthetists a 10% recruitment gap. We have a 10% vacancy, but this goes throughout the NHS. And I suspect figures later on this morning will show an increase in waiting times as well for our patients, which absolutely breaks our heart. I think it's really important that we don't just think about retention, as Saffron said, but we also think about recruitment and training. And we haven't seen the recruitment increase and the training increase that we need. We need to increase our training capacity to allow us to cope with the increased demand that there are on our services at the moment.
Okay. What's the situation, though, when it comes to nurses and anaesthetists working with nurses, and your concerns about the fact that they're having to use food banks in order to survive, according to reports?
So we work in a team. Some of my close friends are nurses, and I know that what they've been going through in the last few years has been pretty bad. I know that they will not have taken the decision to strike lightly, and I know that it will absolutely have racked their brains before they voted yes.
What options are open to anaesthetists to try to improve their conditions?
It's difficult to say, really. in an operating theatre, it's very much a team game, and you need all the cogs in the machine to work very well. We are one part of that cog. We need to increase be able to increase our training and our recruitment to close those gaps, to allow our patients to get the operations that they need. In the meanwhile, the patient's surgical condition is getting worse the longer they wait. These conditions don't get better, and so the operations become more difficult. So it's absolutely imperative that we as an NHS and as a team in total do our best to try and get those patients through.
But strike action is not something that your colleagues would consider. Is it appropriate that nurses are going on strike?
It's not my it's not my role to comment on the strike per se, but as I said earlier, I know that they will not have taken this decision lightly. It's important to remember that in order to retain staff, you need to treat them well and you need to pay them well, and that in the last 10 years, healthcare staff have taken the brunt of the austerity measures, and we've seen a pay freeze probably for about 10 years now. You can do that for only so long, and then you need to do something about it.
How do you feel about former Health Secretary getting paid £400,000 to go into the jungle?
I have to say, I wouldn't go to the jungle myself for £400,000, and I'd much rather do the job that I'm doing here. I'll be doing my job this morning in the NHS, and I'm looking forward to getting there later on this morning.
Does it irritate you that he's there?
Does it irritate me that he's there? Yes, to be honest. This is me speaking as a person. He has a job to do, and I can't go to the jungle because I wouldn't be doing the job that I'm contracted to do. So from that point of view, yes.
OK, thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Official figures analysed by Sky News show that Britain is in the grip of a mental health crisis that's fuelling labour shortages. More than 450,000 people have stopped working in the past 3 years due to conditions such as anxiety and depression. Gurpit Darwin has more for us.
Workers battling the elements on their way to the office. It's almost as if the pandemic never happened. But the lockdowns have left some scars.
I was struggling at work. I felt depressed, I felt alone.
James suffered a mental health crisis in early 2020. His employer paid for some counselling, but it was not enough.
They came back to me to say, you've spent your budget and we can't support you any longer in terms of giving you mental health support. So that was probably my lowest point.
He's not alone. People have been leaving the world of work in record numbers, mainly because of long-term sickness. Levels of economic inactivity among the long-term sick have risen by more than 500,000 since the pandemic. The majority of this increase is related to mental health problems. And a growing number of people in work are also reporting long-term health problems. The key driver, mental health conditions. After hitting rock bottom, James received help from a specialist company, one of a growing number that are trying to solve this problem.
This is the portal. You don't have to go through anyone in the company to access it.
Joel set up an online platform to help employers offer more tailored support to their workers.
You've got lots of your workforce now suffering depression, suffering more anxiety. If you don't support your workforce, you're going to have poor employee outcomes, which are going to create poor business outcomes.
This is an issue that affects everybody, because with a smaller workforce comes smaller economic growth. And if businesses are struggling to recruit, they may be forced into paying higher wages. Good for some, but a concern for the Bank of England, which fears that it could fuel price pressures at a time when inflation is already running rampant. There's a recession on the horizon and a cost of living crisis in full flow. All of this will take a toll on a country already in the grip of a mental health crisis. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
And later this morning, the latest NHS performance figures will be released for hospitals in England, including waiting times and cancelled operations. We'll have live coverage here on Sky News from 9:30. Now, here's a sign of the times: Malta attracting visitors by telling them they can spend weeks on the island and won't have to heat their homes. And that adds to its claims to be one of the most sustainable tourist destinations. We were talking about it, actually, with the CEO of Thomas Cook earlier this week, and he said Malta is very, very popular with Brits. So what we thought was we'd get the Maltese tourism minister in. And here he is, Clayton Bartolo. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us. Why do Brits go to Malta?
There are a number of reasons why Brits should come to Malta. It's an all-round destination, not least, obviously, at the moment, the winter sun, which is coming. And this morning, in fact, it's a perfect day in Malta once again. So all that together, with all that is to do, there is a perfect package destination for everybody to visit.
And a lot of people from Britain do come, not least because it's cheaper to go to Malta than it is to heat your home.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. And when one is there, then he can have an affordable holiday together with his family, something which I believe everybody should be looking for now in these times. You spend some quality time with your friends as well. And there is so much to do, whether it is sampling some of our local cuisine. There are at least 30 restaurants which are now listed in the Michelin Guide.
Wow.
And a lot of other traditional restaurants which can offer you traditional cuisine, which is obviously very well known for in the Mediterranean. A number of events as well, which will be taken up in the coming weeks and months. We have, for example, Cirque du Soleil, which will be running live, a special show made especially for Malta.
Amazing.
We will have a lot of Christmas events going on. And apart from that, there's very good connectivity between Malta and the UK, something which we have been working on over the past few weeks as well, to ensure that next year's connectivity is even better than this year.
So people come for longer than just a couple of weeks. Excuse me, I'll get some water from Luke in a second. And that is, I'm guessing then they're older, are they?
Yes, in fact, at the moment, we're also promoting long stays. So something which it is good for winter as well. In the winter months, you wouldn't have the same cold temperatures which you would get in mainland Europe, something which is totally different than other countries. We are well renowned for having well over 300 days of sunshine. And if one would also like to visit, for example, we have 365 churches. That's one church for every day.
Wow.
Most of which
Have
are
you seen
open.
all of them?
No, not yet. Actually, that's a good point.
What about sustainability?
Yes, on that aspect, then we are working very hard as well with the accommodation sector, whether it is hotels or whether it is private accommodation, to ensure that energy efficiency is at the top of the agenda. On that aspect, the government has also intervened in a positive manner when the energy crisis hit to ensure that the energy bills do not increase. And that means that the rates remain uncompetitive. So that in itself is already a measure of affordability for everyone who wants to visit Malta. At the same time, we're also protecting the local families and the local businesses to ensure that they are not hard hit.
Do you get the impression that tourists, particularly Brits, who come to Malta now are more interested than they ever were about sustainability?
Yes, sustainability shouldn't be just a buzzword. In fact, in our tourism industry nowadays, we are talking more about responsible travel and green travel, and the fact that everyone should, in fact, be responsible for his own emissions, even when traveling. So on that aspect, the Malta Tourism Authority will be launching a project very soon to ensure that while ensuring that everyone is made aware of his responsibilities, then we have to own up for our responsibilities, because at the end of the day, whether you're a Brit coming to Malta or whether you're a Maltese coming to the UK, everybody is responsible.
Yeah, COP27 talking a lot about sustainability and heating of the planet. What's Malta's involvement been with COP27?
Our Prime Minister has been at the COP27, and once again he reassured that Malta, even though small in size, will be doing its part to ensure that the sustainability guidelines are upkept in Malta, and we are also in line with the UNWTO's declarations.
OK. And as far as Brits are concerned, if they want to stay for longer, that there are no problems with that when it comes
Definitely not.
Yeah, no visa issues or anything like that?
Nothing like that. In fact, the relationship between Malta and the UK has been a very good one for a very long time. English is, in fact, one of our national languages. So that means that it's very convenient for Brits to come and stay in Malta. Malta is practically very well connected, not just with London, but with various airports around the UK. So that makes it very easy for anybody who would like to spend some time in Malta, in sunny Malta, to just get a flight and hop over. OK.
I mean, I have to say one of my guilty pleasures is Below Deck Med. And that's based in Malta, isn't it?
Yes.
Did you know that?
Yes, it is.
Beautiful. What's that place called where the dock is? It's a beautiful area.
It's Valletta. That's around the Grand Harbour.
OK.
That is the my opinion, is the nicest harbour one can have, and it's a natural harbour as well.
Okay.
So we welcome their thousands of passenger cruise tourists every year, and everybody is simply astounded. And an interesting fact is the fact that when cruise ships are docking in, the ship's captain, he tells everybody that
she?
Well, yes. She tells everyone that it's worth it to wake up even earlier to watch the ship docking in.
OK, so do you watch Below Deck Med as well?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Captain Sandy's the boss, isn't
yes,
she?
Yes, yes.
If you don't watch it at home, you really should. It's great to talk to you. Thank you so
Same
much
here.
for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Our interview came about because the chief exec, as I said, of Thomas Cook was on the show saying that a lot of Brits are going to Malta over the next few months. If you've got a story that you'd like us to cover, then get in touch. See what happens. Quick look at the weather.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It might be beautiful in Malta. It's not bad here either. Apparently milder by Friday. Wind and rain largely confined to the north and the west. Mainly dry now, but quite cloudy and windy with gales in the northwest. Rain for parts of northern Scotland and a little drizzle elsewhere.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.